Whether you're an author researching how to adapt your book into a screenplay for movies and TV shows, or a reader looking more on the process on how books are developed into something that we're going to see on a screen, today's interview is going to break down everything you need to know about the behind the scenes and the process of getting a book adapted into a screenplay for a movie or a TV show for a big Hollywood company. Let's jump in.
Hi, I'm Richard Wickliffe. I'm a author, and I'm lucky enough that one of my scripts got optioned by 20th Century Fox based on one of my books, sort of an action thriller. And it was a real interesting process. It was a lot of fun, but I learned a lot that hopefully I can share for other people trying to do the same thing.
And I'm really excited because I love looking at the behind the scenes of the production industry. So let's jump right in with what does it mean when your book is optioned for a movie or for a TV show?
Okay. An option is sort of a temporary sale. And the way I learned about it, I sort of thought if I wrote something, I try to sell it to a studio, I get rich, I make all this money, and then they make a movie and life is good. What it is they have so many ideas that are good ideas that if they're interested in possibly even considering making a movie, they will purchase what's called an option. An option is a finite amount of time that they're allowed to consider making it a movie. For an example, a year. Say you came up with the most novel idea of Titanic Part Two, and you have it all fleshed out, and you have a script, and life is good, and you get them interested enough, they may approach you and say, "We want to option this." Now, here's the part where you're not going to get rich. A standard option amount might be $10,000. And that sounds pretty good, but it's $10,000 for them to have a certain amount of time in the contract to consider making it a movie. And in that time they consider it, they talk to producers, they talk to directors, they may even bring it up to a star, and that's where they look for getting some sort of traction on it. At the end of that year, they go, "Oh, well, I tried," and it goes back to you. Now, the important catch here is for that amount of time they have the option, they technically own that story. So while they have that option, you can't say, "Well, I'm going to now try to sell my book to 10 other people and I'm going to create and sell posters for it." They're going to, no, 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 no. We own it, which means they own your characters, they own your plot, they own your story while they're considering it. So you have to say to yourself, am I willing to drop off my baby to these strangers for a year, and I'm going to have to just move on with something else? And it's an important decision because you could say, "No, it's mine." And then they'll go, "Thank you, nice meeting you, goodbye." And that's the end of it. Or you're going to have to give it up and cross your fingers that they do something with it.
And it really is a long process to go through optioning and to get to the other side of that. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that get that is involved with it. They do have to talk to a lot of people. They have to sometimes, if they're just optioning the book, they're going to have to then write a screenplay and they're going to have to transition that over. And then they're going to have to try to get other people involved in it. So, in general, we're talking about a longer process. And I know within my friend groups, I've seen people as little as a year, as long as several years, go through this option process. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And I know because you've gone through this process, you've actually got a lot of really good advice for us. So let's talk about your story. How did this happen for you?
Well, I'm about to publish my fifth action thriller, and at the juncture of doing my second one, it was called Storm Crashers. I felt just like every writer feels, they have a unique idea that's wonderful and no one's ever thought of it before, and that sort of thing. So I thought mine is fresh, and like a lot of your viewers and listeners, I don't have contacts at that time in California. I don't work at a studio. I don't have an uncle that's an executive. I don't even know anyone in the mail room. In fact, some people might live 2,000 miles away. So it's not even feasible to go there to knock on doors. It just sadly doesn't work like that. So after sending, what they call query letters, which now are done sort of electronically, these studios and agents get thousands and thousands and thousands. So it seems like just a black hole. So what I did on mine, I tried to think of an interesting, unique angle to get my story seen by someone rather than the direct route. Here's an example. My story was about high-tech thieves that attack coastline that's evacuated for hurricanes that are coming. So these are people that go in gear, night vision, and they have a countdown clock, and they have to rob these mansions seconds before the hurricane comes ashore and blows away everything. So when I was talking about that, my son, who was a gamer at the time, he was about 12, and I'm not a gamer. He goes, "That would be an incredible game." I go, never thought about that. So I literally Googled movie producer, comma, video games. And in that case, they actually found a production company in LA that their thing was to create games that they can make into movies, or take movies they can make into games. So it was a very unique niche.
Right.
I wrote them a query letter, and within days, my youngest son called me. I'm at Starbucks writing, where most people write, right? And he goes, "Yeah, there's a man from California that wants to talk to you." So I spoke to the gentleman, really nice. He's a friend of mine now. And he said, "This concept is great for a game. And your letter says you already have the screenplay written?" I go, "Yep." That's like a whole step they wouldn't have to do. And he sent me a non-disclosure, and I sent him the script, and they signed me up as a client, meaning their job is to then try to sell it. And they thought it was a fresh idea. It really hadn't been done before, pretty much ever. And that's how I got some success. So, I mean, the way to translate that for your viewers on this, it might not necessarily be the game route, but think about whatever other route. Maybe it's a self-help book, or a romance in the medical field. Just try to think of a niche sort of thing, and maybe try sort of a different tactic like that.
I love that, and I'm a big fan of innovation and looking for those side doors to get into different industries. So I love that you kind of took a little bit of the work off of their plate and offered it to something that wasn't your direct path to getting that adaptation created, which then enabled you to find those extra windows you could go in and the doors that you could kick down to get to your ultimate goal. So as authors are looking to do something like this, it's a very wise choice to be able to take some of that off of their plate to be a little more helpful than other people, and then to find those side ways of getting into the industry. And I know that not everybody jumps right into creating screenplays. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like for you and why we should, as authors, be considering building screenplays into what we're creating.
Well, back on your previous point, where someone thinks you sell a script and you get wealthy, and I want to be a screenwriter, and everyone pictures living in the Hollywood Hills and they're a screenwriter. One of the best kept secrets, I think, is that most new screenwriters and all struggling screenwriters have a day job, and it starts as a hobby. And I know screenwriters that they sell scripts all the time to studios that have worked for years, yet not one script has made it to the film process. It's like a numbers game you wouldn't believe. A studio will buy 1,000 scripts, and out of those 1,000, 2 will be actually what they call greenlit into a movie and financed. And these people hope to make one sale a year, and they might make a good 100,000, but that's just eking by a lifestyle in California. And you're definitely not living in the Hollywood Hills. You're just kind of doing your thing. So in my case, I had a day job. In fact, a lot of my writing dips into my day job, and I went about like that. Now what I do, if anyone's interested in writing novels and also screenplays, I prefer screenplays first. Out of pure selfishness, they're 100 pages instead of 300 pages. And because of the narrow margins, it's 1 page per minute is sort of the rule. So some scripts are even 90 pages. So I write screenplays first, and anyone can Google online and get a template, a Word template for how it's structured, and the margins and all that sort of thing. You can't make up your own. It has to be an industry standard, but you can find those anywhere online. Once you have that saved, you write your script. Might take a while, but if you're ever interested in writing a book, I always write the screenplay first, because in my head, I'd like to sell it as a movie one day. But
Right.
the reason it's also better for me to then write the book is there's no writer's block. By the time I write the book, the structure's done. It has the 3 acts. It has my main characters. It has their story arcs. It has most of the dialogue. Pretty much everything's there. and you do fill in backstory and their thought processes and some research and a lot of that. But that works for me. And that way, when I'm done with the book version and I'm shopping it around, I can say, here's my book about this. I already have a screenplay written over here. And I hope to get that same response as that first company where they go, you already have it done? That's already one less person they have to hire, another year of work, that sort of thing. And face it, my stuff I write to be cinematically. It's not Shakespeare. I'm not trying to change the world with my writing. It's all just fun stuff. But that's the way I do it.
That makes a lot of sense, and I like that you have developed this based on your screenplay, and I feel like for a lot of authors, that's a really good way to figure out your story and plot it out, and then be able to build out your world building and the rest of your storytelling inside of that. So you take what you've already got and you can expand it very, very easily and save yourself a lot of time and effort. And I feel like the reverse is going to be much harder because, especially when it comes to writing our novels, we're doing a lot of things that will not work in movie form. So
Absolutely.
this way, we don't have to restructure things and change things. We can just expand on it from there. So that's an incredibly valuable point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it the other way around. It'd be really hard. I always daydream if someone hired me to take a best-selling novel and turn it into a screenplay. How many times have you heard the book's always better than the movie? And it's because now with streaming on TV, they'll make a 10 or 12 episode show that's based on one book, and it hits all the points. But imagine if you had to take your favorite book and make a movie that's less than 2 hours. And
Right.
that's where you have to grow a lot of thick skin and say, hey, a lot of this is going to get cut out. The subplots are going to get cut out. Major scenes are going to get cut out. So I like it my way around, that it's the screenplay first. And then I can, to use your words, expand that whole world when I write the book version.
I love it. So let's break down some tips and tricks for people. What have you learned along the way that could benefit other authors who are going into this space and attempting to sell a screenplay?
Have a day job, number one, because you will not get rich overnight and be a famous screenwriter. You don't need best friends in California, but it's real easy to get cynical when you see like a Rob Schneider movie and you're like, how did that get greenlit? You know, how many times have you seen a movie, you're like, who wrote that? This is like the worst, craziest thing in the world, but it still took executives to agree with it. And you think to yourself, my story is so much better than what I see on TV, blah, blah, blah. So you got to have thick skin. At the end of the day, it's about money making for the studio and the executives who make the decisions. It's all about making money and marketability. And what's changed in the last 20 years, now it's marketability worldwide. So if you make a very, very, very specific American movie, it's not going to have as much appeal in China and Eastern Europe and all that sort of thing. So that's why you ask yourself, why are there so many Transformer movies and dinosaur movies and action? It's because they can actually sell those internationally. And that doesn't seem fair, but at the end of the day, that's how they make money. So another reason to have really thick skin, and this is from what I learned the hard way, is it's a very, very, very long process. So what do you do if you finally have a producer or someone that's rooting for you that's trying to sell it and they do what's called marketing it to the various studios? What do you do when they come back to you and they say, the good news is they want to option your material. The bad news is, with all due respect, sir, we want to hire Jim Smith, who's a credited screenwriter, and he wants to rewrite your material. You're at a point where you either say, no, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm going to stand by my story. And then again, they say, well, okay, see you later. Or you say, you know what? I am a nobody out there. Nobody knows me out there. And this is my one chance to maybe sell it. And in my case, I actually met the writer. He's written for big name directors. I had dinner with him. He is a Harvard graduate. He's a smart guy. And then I started hearing some of the changes they were going to make. And I just had to bite my tongue and go, okay. And then they changed the title. And the title, I thought they were kidding at first, and they weren't. But this guy has a lot of contacts and was a big shot and gave me a much better chance to get it produced. And in my case, and that's why I call this, and it was an interesting ride. At the end of the day, it didn't get produced into a movie, but we got pretty high in the system. And just the fact it was optioned by 20th Century Fox has opened a lot of doors. Now, what happened in my case, and I don't mean to segue into maybe another topic you have here, but everyone's scared their idea is going to get stolen and they're going to have to sue people. And in my case, with the high-tech thieves approaching hurricanes and getting washed away by hurricanes and all that, I'm a film buff, and I know in 100 years of cinema, it was never, ever done. In fact, they love when you compare your movie. Maybe executives have very short attention spans. If you can describe it in a sentence where it's something meets something else, and those two things were hits. There was a movie called Heat, and it was about high-tech thieves with guns and gear and all this. Mine was sold as Heat meets Twister. Those are only 3 words, and it actually summed up my story almost completely. So anytime they walked into a room, they'd walk to an executive and they'd go, Heat meets Twister. And they'd go, oh, okay. I mean, that's, if you can boil down your story to one hit meets another hit, that's a big, you're going to open the eyes. And the sort of cliche you see in TV movies about how Hollywood works is true. You have the creatives that are brilliant, and their directors and their artists and the writers. Then you have what they call the suits, the executives that sit at the table at Fox that make business decisions, and they really don't have any creativity. And they're the ones that will tell you, hey, do this, do that. And you're not going to believe this. This is like scandalous, but I was talking to 2 really high-end producers that were old school. And I'm a nobody, and I'm listening to them. And they said all these female heroes, change them all to men because people don't want to see the women do all this. And I was shocked. I'm like, this is the kind of stuff, if it leaks, is like a scandal, but they just came right out and said it. And I said, no, because Angelina Jolie would be perfect for this. Scarlett Johansson would be perfect for that. And I kind of pushed back on that. And I will say that climate has changed, but this is an example where they will start telling you changes that you just have to sit there. You either have to smile and nod or sort of try to professionally push back where you don't upset them so much that they don't want to work with you anymore, because it's a kiss of death if you're considered difficult to work with. So you try your best to be friendly and positive. But back to my point about ideas getting stolen. High-tech thieves, hurricane. When my producers, what they called, shopped it all around town, it literally means one day they're sitting at Fox at a table, the next day they're at Paramount at a table, and the next day they're over here. All we know is that idea was revealed around town. Within 6 months, 4 projects were greenlit about high-tech thieves attacking during hurricanes. So is that a coincidence that it's never been done in 100 years? And after mine is shopped around town, 4 projects came out with that. Now, they all had their own twist. In fact, one, it went straight to Redbox. It was like B-level actors. They actually called it Hurricane Heist. And I heard it was horrible. It was a direct-to-video, extremely low budget, that sort of thing. Another one, actually, I'm envious of this idea. It was Pablo Escobar had an island off South America where he hid all his gold, and a bunch of thieves go in to steal it, but a hurricane's on the way. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. And then there was a couple others. Those never got made into films. Now what's happened now, it's completely watered down my concept, and the chance of me selling it now is like, it's not novel anymore. And, you know, when you tell the story to someone like my mom or my wife, they immediately say, sue him, get an attorney and sue, get an attorney and sue. So I did have to research that because I'm upset about it. And if you remember, there was a summer where 2 movies came out about a meteor heading towards Earth, right? That happens a lot. And for your viewers, if you have just a basic concept of an idea, you can't copyright just the concept. But if they started stealing actual scenes, actual characters, actual twists, there are plenty of lawsuits in California about that sort of stuff. But in mine, they just took the basic premise. So I could either complain and cry and bitch about it, or I can say, well, my brain came up with that, so let's just come up with something else. And I just sort of moved on from there.
And I feel like with a lot of these things, especially in the publishing industry, we do get really, really scared over things like that potentially happening. So one of the things that I bring up to my viewers a lot is that we have different genres and different tropes and different things that people are allowed to use. And so if it's that generalized concept, there's not an awful lot you can do about it. But if it gets down to the specifics, then you have more ground to stand on, and perhaps you should be taking more of those legal actions to protect what you are doing. But this is part of the industry, and you have to understand going into it, if you want to take these steps forward, there will be some risk involved in it, and you have to be okay with that. And I think it's really important that you pointed out as you're having these discussions when shopping the different manuscripts around and when you are deciding who you want to work with and if you're going to be willing to let go of your creative control, you do need to decide before you step into this what you're going to be okay with and what you're not going to be okay with. And it boils down to when you are offered a contract, you get to negotiate it and you get to make some choices. So if you feel like you want your hands in it, perhaps you can negotiate and do things with them or have some oversight of it. And maybe you can. It depends on who you work with and how you're working with them. So I highly encourage you, if you are stepping into this part of the industry, that you have a really good lawyer on your team to look over these contracts and to help advise you as you're taking steps forward with this. And I know that you spent a lot of time and a lot of effort working on your manuscript and working on your play, or your, not your play, but your screenplay. There we go. That's the word. And I know that you created your story to be very high budget. We talked a little bit about this, but I really want to drill down on if you are going to be taking the steps to create your screenplay first, then create your manuscript, because your goal is to get a movie made out of this, that you should make it budget friendly. So can you talk a little bit about that just so we're aware of what we should be considering as we're writing?
Yeah, I learned that the hard way, and I don't really change my writing because of it necessarily. But to your point you just said about protecting your work, a little tip for your viewers: an actual copyright. It sounds so big and scary, and you have to, oh, do I need an attorney? How does that work? It's online, and it's like $40. And as soon as you do that, your screenplay is copyrighted, or your book is copyrighted. Which in reality, you'll have sites that tell you you don't necessarily need to copyright if you can just prove you owned it on a certain date, blah blah blah. But if you feel better with a copyright and you want to put that little copyright symbol, it's about $40. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the Writers Guild of America. That sounds so big that only, Brad Pitt is a member, or you have to be a big actor or a writer to be a member of the Writers Guild of America. Anybody can register their screenplay with the Writers Guild of America. It's called WGA, Writers Guild of America. It's something like $20. It's ridiculous. And when you do it, they send you back a WGA registration number. So if you're shopping your script around, at the bottom of the page, you give your contact information, you put WGA registration number. It tells them, A, I'm protecting myself, and B, hey, maybe this guy's part of the WGA and he's not really a newbie. He sort of looks like he's in the system or a player somehow. And it's like $20. So that's the thought. But to your point about production, one of the reasons when the dust settled on mine, and we had some big names circling it, and it eventually did not work out, I sort of asked some of the producer friends I had, what do you think went wrong? Was it the story? Was it the script? They said, no, the truth is what you wrote as you wrote it would cost about $200 million to film. It's Miami getting devastated, skyscrapers falling, explosions, special effects, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, when you write, you have no budget in what you're writing. You can write the biggest thing in the whole entire world, but it's going to be, are they going to fund a film written essentially by a newbie that's to that level? Maybe, but a quote that I only read about 2 months ago, and I didn't write it down, but it was on one of these writing sites. The quote was from Seth Rogen. And basically he says, if you write a script, do something small enough that they can actually produce it very inexpensively. So think about character piece, a small town film, something that maybe no special effects. It's a character study, just something that you're going to have a much better chance of a studio going, okay, this is not that big of a gamble. We can make this movie for $20 million, make an indie. Maybe you can even sell it to an indie studio, something like that, and have a lot better chances. So that's something that took me about a decade to figure out. So there you go.
And the nice thing with that is if you start small, you can build bigger. So if you start off with something that's a little more manageable for other people to take on as a project, then you get that credibility. You have that foundation laid for you, and then you can build up to the insanely expensive stories that they might option
Yeah,
in the
it's all about
future.
clout. And when I started, like a lot of viewers, they have no clout. They have no one have contacts in the movie business. But if you get that little bit of clout, yeah, let's say even like a college indie film that wins some awards at a festival, that already gives you some clout for the next project. And to your point before about getting attorneys, that sounds very intimidating. How am I going to get a Los Angeles attorney because I'm a nobody? Well, that clout, what I did in my case, I didn't have an attorney, but the minute the studio wanted to option it, someone gave me, I think, 3 emails of high-end entertainment attorneys, and these all have Beverly Hills office addresses. Okay, I wrote all 3, and first sentence says, 20th Century Fox wants to option my script. That's all it had to say. All
Yeah.
3, and this is true, and this is one of my most exciting trips out there. I actually set up interviews for me to interview the attorneys to see if I wanted to go with them. And I remember that day very clearly. And again, I'm a nobody, but I go out there and I dress up and I got a jacket and very professional. And I sat down with 3 high-end attorneys for them giving me a spiel on why I should hire them. Funny side note, one of the attorneys was in the movie Goonies. Is his name Chunky? Chunky the okay.
I don't know.
He's one of the heavier set kids that was like the comic relief in Goonies, and that has a huge cult following. He's the attorney, and he looks completely
Mhm.
different now. He's 150 pounds, bald, very, very like go, go, go. And evidently, he's a very successful attorney. So I sat across the
Okay.
desk from him, and he told me how he approaches things. And at the very end, I knew in my heart I wasn't going to hire him. I felt bad about that. But I go, my kids and wife are a big fan. Can I get your autograph? His eyes actually lit up. He dug in his drawer, found a picture from Goonies. He made it out to my wife and my kids, and I brought it home. And then I had to tell him, I wasn't going to hire him after that, which is really awkward. The guy I eventually
Yeah.
hired, turns out to this day, I'm able to communicate with him. But the guy I hired was one of the largest firms in Beverly Hills, represents Ashton Kutcher, James Cameron, all these names. And that was only because I had an option in the hopper. And now that I think back, I didn't have to pay one dime because he wrote up the contract and did all this under the hope a big deal eventually happens. But it's sort of like a contingency deal. If it doesn't,
Uh-huh.
it's no harm, no foul. That guy worked on my stuff and wrote contracts and did all this stuff. And so to this day, if I ever have a legal question or fortunately have like another sales situation, I can go straight to him as long as he doesn't retire. So really the attorney thing, if you have something going, is real easy to do.
That makes a lot of sense, and I've worked with attorneys in the publishing space as well who also work on sliding scales, so based on what money you are making, they get paid. So, b working with an attorney does not have to be a big, overwhelming, terrifying thing for you to get into, you just need to do your research and then pick the correct fit for you and your project, so it's always wise to make sure you've got options and you're doing your research and due diligence when it comes to that. As we're wrapping up today's conversation, I wanna make sure that we touch on everything we need to know about book adaptations. So anything else we need to be aware of?
I think you have to write cinematically and think of something. And another piece of advice someone gave me: write out something you really, really like. Don't try to do a stretch assignment where I don't know really much about firefighters that work in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to sort of research, and because whatever you're writing, you're going to be spending a year plus, maybe years. So do something you enjoy and you like. If it's more on the comedy side or more on the supernatural science fiction, at least do something you like and enjoy. So that way it doesn't feel like work every time you do it. And the best compliment I can get on any of my writing, and again, I don't write Shakespeare, is when a reader says, "Wow, this would make a really great movie." I feel like saying, will you please tell someone that, sell it out there. But again, you kind of mentioned earlier, to kind of make their work a little bit easier, do a little bit for them. Learn how to write online about writing a log line, which is like a 2-sentence description of your story. Someone goes, oh, that's impossible. My book is a saga that spans 80 years and I can't do it in 2 sentences. And they write a paragraph like that. No one will read that. No executive, nobody. And if you remember the old TV guide, that was an example of how it'd be 8 o'clock, Godfather, a mafia family, the siblings work to help the father. They sum up a 3-hour classic in about 2 sentences. So it's practice on doing that. And they call that the hook. Another good word to know is high concept or low concept. An example on high concept is that's a little more of like a popcorn movie, where you have an idea that just based on that idea alone is a really cool idea. The Titanic sinking, that's high concept. It's very specific. Superman, an alien comes from another world that has superpowers. That's high concept. Low concept would be these movies that sometimes are very popular in indie circles, where it's a very quiet, slow drama. Maybe it's a character piece and it's built on dialogue, and you kind of watch it and maybe not a lot happens, but it still draws you in based on the relationships and the characters. So the truth is, regardless what kind of artist you want to be, what sells is the higher concept, if you can see it on the screen. So if you can think of all that, all while keeping it inexpensive, that's a lot to kind of shove all together, but you have a much better chance of someone at least reading it.
And making those small steps and those little efforts to make it easier for somebody to take on your project really can make or break your success inside of this industry. This has been so incredibly helpful and packed with value. We talked a little bit about your story that almost made it into a movie, and I know you've got quite a few stories out now. So before we let you go, tell us what we need to know about your books.
Whether I sell one or not ever again to a studio, I still write cinematically because I'm a movie buff and I like movies, and I write books. And when I write them, I picture who's playing what part, picturing what it would look like on the screen. That's just my personal style. My stuff, I go by either Rich Wickliffe or Richard Wickliffe, and you can find me online on Amazon and my own website. It's Rich Wickliffe author page on Facebook and Richard Wickliffe on Amazon. A lot of it is rooted in sort of a high-tech crimes. I've lived in Florida my whole life, so it's a lot of islands, tropics, Miami, kind of based on that. And sadly, here in South Florida, there's no shortage of scandals or crimes in Miami, and I could just turn on the news and get a new idea. So I have some of that coming up. The new project I have working on, again, is totally to try to sell as a movie, is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Was one of my favorites as a kid. And if you're over a certain age, there was an attraction at Magic Kingdom Disney World where you went into a submarine and you saw these things. And a lot of kids, that was their favorite ride. And I wrote a book wondering if I could rewrite the classic, because it's in public domain now. You can rewrite it, but make it modern, a modern way that's semi-plausible of what if it could happen today. And with a lot of research and a lot of contacts in different industries, I've written it, and it's published this October. And mine is called 20,000 Kilos Under the Sea. And it's an action thriller. I purposely wrote what they call in the industry set pieces, which means big action sequences. In every movie, they want like 3 big action sequences. And yes, I broke my own rule. It would be very expensive to make this movie. But from doing my own research, I found that studios have been trying to reboot, remake 20,000 Leagues multiple times with multiple directors, and they keep saying I think the word they use is they haven't been able to crack how to do it. I feel like mine is a way to crack. I cracked it, and so I've already written the screenplay. So I'm doing everything I can to sort of reach out and get the word out there. And maybe when the book comes out, if I get some traction or publicity from that, it'll kind of open some doors. One last little trick I did, which isn't that expensive. Once you have a couple parties interested in your stuff in California, even if you're conversing, via email, and you sort of have them on the hook a little bit, but you're actually conversing with a human, and you have a couple going. I thought, I want to be that guy that's in LA and I'm going to meetings with these people that have power. Because just like in any sales job or personal job, if you shake their hand, look them in the eye, sit and talk with them for a second, you make a much better connection than just a bodiless person on email, even video or Zoom.
Mhm.
So most people can afford, you get a cheap enough flight to LA round trip. It was doable. It was like $300 first time I did it. Cheapest hotel room I could find, cheapest rental car. I did it in 2 days, probably less than $500 for the trip. But to set up a meeting, instead of just saying, I want a meeting with you, I said, I'm going to be in the area. And this sort of gives the impression, because I have other meetings, I'm going to be in your area on October 3rd and 4th. I'd love to swing by and just introduce myself. And they're like, well, if you're going to be in the area, okay. So then I call the next party and I go, I'm going to be in your area on these dates. I'd love a chance to swing by. So there was times I set up 2 or 3 meetings, even if it's literally a cup of coffee or 10 minutes. But I did that, going to each one, meeting them, shaking hands. And these are all people that to this day, I can write them for stuff. And whether they can really help me or not, they at least know people who do. And I feel like I've built a much better connection with these people just by making that $500 investment. And plus, not only that, it was fun, to go out and do that. Feel like you're part of it for a little bit. But I'll keep trying. But unless you're independently wealthy, keep that day job, and you have more fun with as a hobby anyway.
That's a very good point. For further questions, where can everybody reach out to you
Okay.
online?
My direct email is miaminovelwriter@yahoo.com. Write me for anything. Richard Wickliffe on Amazon. Rich Wickliffe author page on Facebook and Instagram. And it'll be a lot of stuff coming out soon about the new release in October for 20,000 kilos. And a lot of people, when I've mentioned it, I've had a lot of people come out of the woodworks and they say, wow, that was really my favorite book or movie as a kid. And I think there's like an audience out there that I hadn't really even thought about, because I kind of wrote it just for myself. So I'm looking forward to see how that goes.
And if you liked today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe and notification bell for more interviews just like this to help you level up inside of the publishing and reading industries. And we also want to make sure that you hang out with Rich's interview for Experts for Authors, where we dive into the world of white-collar insurance crimes and how you can be writing those accurately inside of your stories. If you have other people you would like to see on the channel, drop those down below and let me know what questions you have, as we will be monitoring these to make sure we're getting your questions answered over the next couple of days and weeks. We'll see you in the next episode as we continue to help you level up and learn more about the publishing industry and the behind-the-scenes things that you might not see from the outside.